Hi everyone, welcome back from after the coffee break. We go on with this session on risk-stratified colorectal cancer screening that I am leading the task 9.4, which is focused on this topic. We'll have three presentations like in the other session. I will start with the monitoring and evaluation of risk-based approaches. There will be based mainly on colorectal cancer as an example, but there are some issues that are common and are reflecting what has already been mentioned in previous presentation this morning. No conflict of interest declared. Then we have, as Paolo presented this morning, there are some, let's say, strategies we can adopt to address the issue of risk-stratified screening, and when all of them need to be monitored and implemented in the context of ongoing programs, some of them, as we discussed in the framework, may also need to get to have evidence of effectiveness, in particular when you are changing the interval, when you change the test, or you are changing the positivity threshold. Some evidence of the effectiveness of the new strategy should be provided. And I will go through a couple of examples based on ongoing trials, risk-based approaches in colorectal cancer screening to show some of these the issues related to this, to the need for evidence. Sorry, here is not so clear, but anyway, this is referred to a targeted trial, the trial which has been conducted in China, and one of the first trials using a risk-stratified approach to offer cancer screening. And the way risk was stratified is using a validated risk score that was also validated in the population in China, the target population of the trial, with a moderate predictive ability. The risk score is combining age, sex, family history, smoking, and BMI. So not many information, but some key variables. They provided information about the positivity rate around the cumulative positivity rate, compliance with the colonoscopy, and with the positive or high risk, detection rate again around the cumulative and the positive predictive rate. They will show that they had three arms. The first one, the people were for colonoscopy screening, the other one was annual fit, and the third one was risk-adapted strategy, where people with high risk, according to the score, were referred for colonoscopy, while the other people low risk were referred for annual fit. The most interesting comparison between annual fit and the risk-adapted strategy, the colonoscopy group had a lower participation in many cases in this comparison and a higher detection rate. In the two risk-adapted and fit groups, the risk-adapted was associated with high detection rate and moderate increase in the cost and the amount of resources. Participation in at least one test was similar. There are a couple of interesting issues. The first one is that we cannot really have an idea of the participation because volunteers were enrolled through a media campaign and they were selected by the study staff for eligibility, so there is a very high participation, over 95% in the annual fit groups. The cumulative positive result over 3 screening rounds was much higher in the risk-adapted group than in the annual fit, and this is also because in this positive result you are including also those who are judged to be at high risk according to the risk score, which is probably not so specific. And another issue is that the compliance with colonoscopy referral in the fit arm and in the low risk group performing fit was similar, 74% or 75%. In the high risk group, the participation in colonoscopy was quite low, 49%. That means that the acceptability of this high risk classification, the high risk protocol, was not so high. We have other examples of predictive modeling. The first one using a risk calculator to estimate the individual risk and to define and to inform based on this estimation the recommendation for cancer screening, for colorectal cancer screening. The panel suggested to use the risk calculator, which has been validated, also mentioned this morning, using age, sex, ethnicity, BMI, smoking history, and ethnicity to estimate the overall risk of colorectal cancer over 15 years. And the group, based on evaluation of the benefit balance of 4 screening strategies, FIT 1 year, FIT 2 years, colonoscopy, sigmoidoscopy, once in a lifetime, compared to screening, concluded for a weak recommendation against starting screening for people with a cumulative 15-year risk of colorectal cancer below 3%, and to start screening, to offer screening, again a weak recommendation in favor, for people with an overall risk over 15 years over 3% probably. The problem with this kind of approach is that it implicitly favors the shorter-term reduction in cancer mortality as opposed to longer-term decrease in cancer incidence, which you can obtain if you start screening earlier, or in this case, the age of starting screening was postponed to older ages. In general, for the evaluation of this kind of approaches, one issue is sustainability that has been already suggested that there is an important request of additional data and possibly additional samples, which might undermine the sustainability of the program. They might require an intervention on the IT system, which should be updated to collect more data and to record and manage and analyze more data. And the organization requirement to start the delivery of the questionnaire, to recording the data and so on. In terms of acceptability, the request of additional data might reduce the participation, and then there is the issue of stigmatization that has already been mentioned this morning, because we are classifying the risk based on individual behaviors. There might be some stigma. There is an issue of equity, because the increase of the need of resources might amplify the gap between programs or countries which have more resources to those screening as opposed to those who have low resources. And there is a barrier related to the access to the system, because providing the information might not be so easy for people with low education. And the predictive accuracy, the classification of risk, given the low discriminatory power of the risk prediction model, might result in a proper recommendation. So we should monitor the risk in both in the high risk group and the low risk group based on the model prediction. We have also the possibility to use screening history. We have data from modeling from the Netherlands showing that the predictive accuracy is improved when using the result of the first fit in addition to age and sex. And we have a result from a large study in Italy, but similar result has been provided by a study in Spain, showing that using the cumulative fecal hemoglobin over 2 consecutive fit tests is showing that there is a high-risk group where the cumulative advanced neoplasia detection rate over 2 screening rounds and the interval cancer rate over 36 months is 15 to 20 times higher than the same outcomes in the group with very low fecal hemoglobin level. That is risk group with very different risk in the future, for the near future, over 3-4 years. Based on this result, there are 2 trials ongoing. This is the DASH trial, which is comparing usual care approaches compared to the risk-adapted approach, using the information from the first screening fit, and based on the amount of hemoglobin in the first screening, in this risk-adapted arm, the interval is extended to 3 years for those below fecal hemoglobin level, maintained at 2 years for those intermediate level, and then shortened to 1 year for those with fecal hemoglobin levels which are closer to the fit cutoff used in the Netherlands. They are comparing the 2 arms in terms of field of screening and in terms of participation. In Italy, we are running another trial where people in the high-risk group is randomized to 3 arms, immediate TC for shorter term fit every 1 year compared to the standard 2-year fit, that we are introducing a different test for those high risk. And for those at lower risk, we are extending the interval to 3 years. We can have also in our case the comparison between the standard arm and the risk-adapted arms, but our analysis is focused mainly on the difference within each risk group, and not mainly across the intervention. The endpoints are positivity rate, positivity value, detection rate of adenomas, interval cancer rate. We are also considering participation. We are asking people whether they would be interested to be included in a protocol using risk-based approach, and that this availability, this interest, this expression of interest can be considered a proxy of participation in this kind of approaches. Here, in terms of sustainability, the expected impact should be limited because we have already the information. This is the lower hanging apple that was presented by Iris. The risk-stratified intervals might not be accepted, particularly when the interval is longer, and it's already been shown also for other screening programs. And in the issue of equity, we need to provide probably some information about the risk, which is, let's say, present for those who are having a longer interval, and this can be provided just if you run the analysis focused on this specific risk group and not just comparing the risk-adapted versus standard risk approach. In terms of the method we can do for the evaluation, generally the preferred design would be to run within ongoing programs randomized cross-sectional or prospective comparative effectiveness trials. But we have already cohort analysis within ongoing programs. Which one of them is this quantified study, which is ongoing also in the context of the EUCanScreen, in collaboration with the EUCanScreen detection. There is also a target triangulation approach, which could be an option for analyzing observational data. All these studies, and I think it's appropriate, are using intermediate outcomes, not mortality. We don't need probably to go for mortality trials, otherwise we never have the data which are necessary to decide about the adoption of these studies. We need to consider the time perspective. Probably we need to compare the different strategy over the same time interval, and using also cumulative data of the cumulative estimate of this indicator, like the one which have been used in the Chinese trial. Here is just an example of what could be the comparison when you are using 1 year, 2 year, and 3 year with FIT. The best approach would be to analyze it at 3 arms at 6 years, where you have 6 arms for 1 year and 2 for 3 years, and so on. So that would be the most informative analysis and should be considered when running this kind of trials. In terms of monitoring,
3 minutes.
3 minutes, okay. In terms of monitoring, we have we should monitor, of course, disparities, because we are worried about disparities. We should monitor harms, which is one of the main issues that can distinguish the different groups. And but there will be here we don't see anything. But anyway, the issue is that given the people target population is stratified by different risk group and different interval to calculate, to monitor the coverage might become quite difficult because given the distribution over time of different subgroups, the population is no longer the same, which is repeating regular tests that we are used to do now. In conclusion, we need, for these reasons, individual level data, integrated screening, and data register information for evaluation and monitoring. And probably the difference between evaluation and monitoring is no longer there because we are aiming to introduce these new approaches using an evaluation approach, using trials which are embedded within ongoing trials, within ongoing programs, and to evaluate this result while the program is ongoing. So the monitoring indicators and the evaluation indicators should probably be the same, and we should change our IT infrastructure, our organization of the programs to be able to make these new needs which are reflecting the need of evaluating to get data for evaluation on a prospective basis. Thank you very much for your attention.
To have these topical presentations. And have my slide? Okay. Yeah, so this is our team, and I'm so happy to attend this EUCan screening. And to show the Taiwan screening program. And Taiwan has launched nationwide free screening since 2004, covering about 60 million people. And actually, using the free test, and we get the 7% positive rate, also 70% recall rate, and the effectiveness is about 34% reduction for 40% mortality reduction, and about 36% for advanced cancers. Now, the government has expanded to lower the age to 45 because the lowering incidence for the young age group, as you have already seen. And it just published a recent result using the longitudinal follow-up data to demonstrate about 21 to 25% incidence reduction and also 34 to 35 mortality reduction. So based on this evidence, this year, Taiwan government lowered the age group. So due to the expansion of the screening program, also the lower age group, so we have to consider the cost and also the clinical capacity of the colonoscopy. So we have to consider personalized risk factors by taking into account the trade-off, as you already mentioned about sensitivity and specificity, by constraining the cost and the clinical capacity using the criterion of the Latvia gain, also the number of needs screening. So I leveraged the data for 20 years because since 2004. So we have 20 years data. And Taiwan used the two-brain type fit. And I used the OC sensor today. And you can see this is the distribution of the concentrations. And 90% people with very low risk, with very low concentrations. So we only actually the free test only targeted the small proportion of the high concentrations. So in 2011, our colleague Professor Sen already found a gradient relationship, the baseline, the concentration, and also the incidence as well as the mortality relationship. So later, our colleague Professor Yan and also Professor Sen apply this gradient relationship by maintaining the same effectiveness of the biennial screenings and to adjust the different screening interval for different concentration, as you have seen in the tables. Also take into account about colonoscopy into account. And you know, the feed concentration, of course, is a dynamical predictors. So we use this follow-up again, to look at the year by year, the change of the fecal concentrations. And you can see from advanced adenoma, colorectal cancer, advanced CRC, and also the CRC base is a remarkable gradient relationship. Then we use the Poisson models to make adjustment for age and gender in order to, in the future, to consider the cutoff for different age and also gender. And so this is actually the upper table, which is followed by concentrations, and you can see a very, remarkable gradient relationship. And use this to calculate the low the concentration you use, the more likely you get, but it's a sacrifice of the high number need the screenings, of course. So in terms of the inter-screen intervals, because of intervention as a biennial. So you take the biennial as reference group, then based on the data, the upper table of the data, then you can shorten the interval for the high risk group and then lengthen the interval for the low risk group. And for those already done the colonoscopies at the posterior result, you can also apply the same logic. So this is actually the personalized schedules to consider the different. Usually this is a very rich thing. But how about if you want to adapt even different interval for each person? So you need to consider the transition between the two scripts. So you see, in terms of positive rate of result, among false negative feed concentration, it shows very remarkable the gradient relationship. And even you take the two negative feed, and you see the trend are still the same. So in terms of the CRC risk, they show the same gradient relationship here. You can see among the feed negative by the concentrations, and show, you still show the feed 2 test negative, still show the gradient relationship. And the right side, you see the 3 consecutive, stratified by first negative result and the concentrations. And the second, the negative result concentration. And you can see the gradient relationship there. So in the futures, actually, if you can use the modeling, you can also provide not only the personalized schedules, but sometimes you can really schedule for different intervals for different persons. So this is I summarize from baseline about the regular interscript interval for different persons, but also you can develop even complicated adaptive the interscript intervals by using the information I provide. And this strategy applied to surveillance intervals as well. After polytetrals, you can always do the same things by following the high and the low risk group within the guideline. The USA and also the European guideline is the same. So I use our data, about 80,000, with complete colonoscopy and the polytectomy, and to see the low risk and high risk group. And you can still show, using the same criteria I already mentioned, to develop the longer interval for low risk group. And the longer group for the low concentration, and the low the shorter interval for the high concentrations by low risk group and high risk group. And the advantage of this is you can save a lot of the colonoscopy, about 39% here. And of course, high risk group, because we still use the guideline. If you're greater than the guideline, we just follow the guideline. So it's still, you cannot get the colonoscopy benefit. It's just the same, almost same. But these dominate this. And the benefit for the risk of CRC can be reduced for the high risk group. So this is for a fixed surveillance interval by concentrations. Now, we still need a randomized control study. Like Carlo already proposed the perfect study in Dutch, the biofeed in Italy. But in order to get closer to the result, or to convince the people of personalized treatments, when you finish the randomized control trials, you can also use the digital twin and the metaverse. And before you're waiting for the longer follow-up time, you can see something like this. So this is why I right now I use our community database to do the digital twin study to see how this precision screening strategy can work. So this is our the young AI just in the room is my team. She's very clever, and she used the same design about our like the perfect study, but we divide it to biennial and also the precision interval following the baseline and subsequent regular, and also the precision surveillance intervals after qualitative. So, in order to get closer to people, we are talking about informed consent, we are talking about ethical. So before we doing the personalized screening strategy, even in Taiwan, we try to use the large language models by fitting, you already found the evidence base about the lengthened interval and the shortened interval for different risk groups. So you fit this under the large language models based on the already released references and the literature review and your evidence-based data to do the IEG, the actual retrieval augmented, the evidence, the generations. Then you can use the digital twin technique to do the iterative result and to see which one is optimal for these persons. If you want to incorporate the personal characteristics. But of course, you need the data. So this is like the large language model we use. The ChatGPT, you chat with the ChatGPT. The layman chat with the ChatGPT with the condition about a change of the vagal concentrations. Then the ChatGPT uses a long chain by composing your chain of the thought. And finally, they can answer the feed the result by using your precision interval strategies and to suggest these persons based on this dynamical relationship. You can suggest the 1 year screening intervals after this result or the colonoscopies. And this is actually very helpful because if professional data already know that, but the layman can chat with them to communicate with the peoples when you lengthen the interval for the low risk group to guarantee that the risk will not longer than 2 years, the 2 years of regular biennial screening. So this is actually very good. And the digital twin actually can also to help you to evaluate how can we reduce the over-detection of the adenoma because you lengthen the intervals for the low risk group. And also they can tell you about how did you reduce the free test in colonoscopies. In these examples, reduce over adenoma about 19%, free test about 40% free test, and 41% on colonoscopies. So the next thing is, how can we incorporate the personalized characteristic? So you need the digital twin approach, and you need this technical knowledge. And we just, our Dr. Abby just developed this computer, publishing the computer journals by using this 5 steps. So from the real world data, then you use the machine learning algorithm to develop the virtual complete natural history model. Then you synthesis bridging between the real world data and also virtual data. So then you use this data to play your interventions from primary, secondary, and tertiary. So it's turned from personalized screening to the personalized preventions. But of course, you need the data. So that's why I think involved in not only the nationwide screening program, but also community-based studies. And this is our one very organized community called the Zhanghua Community Screening Program, with the director, Deputy Director Dr. Ye, to collect such kind of the information like diet, happy lifestyle, metabolic syndrome factor, which is always very important for early age onset of colorectal cancer, and also biomarkers, we go for part concentration. Then I don't have time to take the technical, but this is actually I apply the Bayesian network. The Bayesian network is another the counterpart of the artificial neural network. The advantage is they can clarify the causal relationship between the personal trait associated with the different state of the disease progressions. So by developing these modeling, then you can build up the percentile risk spectrums for each stage of disease. And this is powerful because once you complete these machine learning models, so the patients can use these models and to have a complete the trajectory of the disease progressions. Then you can assign the primary prevention, secondary screening test, tertiary preventions, and to evaluate the combination to get the result of the personal interventions. For example, you can see if one person wants to have a lifestyle microbiota, and you suggest an annual screening or colonoscopy based on fecal concentration, and also the treatment and therapies.
Sorry?
Then,
5 minutes.
okay. Then you see, and you can use these very detailed individual characteristics. For example, a 46 years man, and the fetal concentration has already known a change from 60 to 450s. And the lifestyle is like the right side of medicine. And also the dietary habit, also biochemical for some biomarkers. Then you can just provide the combination of the interventions. So you can do iterative the combination, and the person can consult with the doctors to free choice to any combination and ask what if and what happens if I change from this intervention to another intervention. So for example, this is one of optimal results. We see people with this history and lifestyle modification with the microbiota, and also apply the annual or colonoscopy, and because it's very high concentrations, so maybe you can also consider the immunotherapy of microbiota, whatever. Then you can evaluate the risk of the incidence reduction, mortality reduction, and also over-detection of the reduction of the over-detection of the lymphomas. So this is actually the patients we want to test. This is only very in the scratch periods. But the important thing is you need the high granularity of data. Otherwise, you cannot have the personalized interventions. Then you can go to the personalized screening, or you can go to a personalized schedule screening. And this is actually a step by step. So I'm very happy here because Asian countries has a different patterns and different style of the screening programs. We want to join the local screening to see what we can make contributions. So that's why one of the important things is a fish screening combined with gastric cancers. Inga just presented. This is our study in the randomized control trial in Zhanghua to compare the fit and also HPA with the fit test. And we are not only enhance the detection rate of the gastric cancers, but also we also make contribution to early detection of the colon cancer. So it's one of the examples for randomized control trial. But I just want to share my experience. Policymakers keep asking the result year by year. If we wait long and long time, sometimes they lose patience. Sometimes they don't give you money. So digital twin is not to replace randomized control trial, but just speed up, and just give you some insight into the mechanism of the randomized control trial. I learned from COVID-19 because vaccine development, because the drug development. That's why I share with you, and thank you so much.
He introduced this topic, and so I'm going to talk about the role of microbiota in the colorectal cancer and the analysis that were done to show the impact of microbiota and how we can use it as a diagnostic for detecting this cancer. I'm going to talk mostly about the intestinal microbiota, even if as you know, microbiota is everywhere, in food and in the mouth, but the intestinal microbiota is the most complex. It's highly charged in microorganisms in fecal sample, and you can find a very diverse ecosystem in it. You have different type of cells that you can find in a fecal sample, mostly bacteria, but you can also detect viruses, phages that are attacking these microorganisms, or human viruses, as well as archaea, eukaryotic cells, and for sure you also find human cells and blood, for instance, or even DNA. So human microbiota is highly analyzed since the rise of the new technologies of exploring this ecosystem, and today it is known that about 80% of the microorganisms are cultivated, but about 20% are still unknown, non-cultivated. So this is still an ecosystem with a lot of microorganisms that we don't know still. In colorectal cancer, we know that some specific microorganisms can induce chronic inflammation. And chronic inflammation is actually one of the first stages of the colorectal cancer. Some microorganisms that were identified as the cause of triggering these inflammations, for example, Fusobacterium gelatum or Bacteroides fragilis, are known to are favorable for the immune tumor development. And when I talk about species, actually you have to think about potential mechanisms. Some species they don't necessarily have all the mechanism to trigger the inflammation. You can find, for instance, Hsiu-Hsi Chen, which is a very common species that almost everybody gets, but some E. coli subspecies, they contain enzymes that can trigger tumor growth. With, for example, the Colibactin producing E. coli. It means that even if you know the species, it's not necessarily producing the enzyme that triggered the mechanism of inflammation. So it's really important to know not only the species, but also the function that it contains. The human microbiota is a very complex ecosystem, very heterogeneous. A recent study analyzed about 20,000 microbial samples from 20,000 microbial from donors, and they tried to show the differences in composition. In the plot that you see on the left is a kind of a PCOA-like representation. Each dot is a donor. The color of the dots correspond to the dominant microorganism that you can find. And it is known that some individuals they have some specific dominant microorganism. It's called enterotype or enterosignatures. but there are some differences in the dominant microorganisms that you can find. You got individuals with Prevotella microorganism dominant or Bacteroides dominant. Clostridiales is the central cluster with a lot of unknown microorganisms actually, because they are very sensitive to oxygen and they are very hard to cultivate. And then you have on the top, you cannot see well, but the anaerobes, and these are mostly microorganisms dominant in early life, because that's a development. Microorganisms are developing in the early life. It's not really stable, and then it's progressively shifting from a dominant, aerodominant, to these other classes. And what we know from these is actually not a fixed dominance. It's not like blood type. You can shift from one dominant microorganism type from another, but the graph is representing the effort that you need to switch from one to another. For example, if you are in the Bacteroides on the very right side, it's going to be very complicated for you to switch to Prevotella. Switching is, you can switch of enterotype, but a lot of things. It could be medication, it could be diet, it could be stress, it could be a lot of things that actually make you switch from one dominant type of microorganisms to another. So this is also something that we start to know a little more, because we have more temporal studies from early life to adults, and this is a little more investigated. The Bacteroides partition, for the individuals with a dominance of Bacteroides, it is commonly known that they have a lower richness. A lower richness could reflect actually dysbiosis. Dysbiosis could actually reflect inflammation, and is actually potentially higher probability of developing colorectal cancer. What I'm going to talk about is mostly metagenomic analysis, so DNA in the sample. This is a technique that is focusing on purifying the DNA from a fecal sample. From this purified DNA that we extract, we sequence the DNA, all the molecules that we could find randomly, and then at the end we have this short fragment of DNA that we try to assign to species that we know and functions that we know. And these various steps, each steps are extremely crucial, because if the way you collect or the way you do DNA purification could actually modify the interpretation that you have at the end. And I'm going to give you an example for that. I just wanted to mention that there are many tools to classify the DNA into different species and functions. I'm not going to go into the details of the softwares, but it's just to let you know that there are a lot of softwares. Depending on the one you use, you will not have exactly the same answer. But what is important to know is that with the fragments, you can do species level analysis, functional analysis, which is the type of enzymes that you have, and you can also do strain level analysis, because as human microorganisms, they have differences in their DNA, even the same species, and you can identify different type of species, as the E. coli one that I mentioned before. You get different softwares. We have more or less accuracy to detect species. I don't want to go into the details, but it's just to let you know that today the software are getting really good to detect species, but some are more precise than others. And it's also important to know the softwares that you use and the database that was used before, to know if the detection of species is representative of the sample you analyze. All right. This now is an example of meta-analysis on colorectal cancer in microbiota, fecal microbiota. So this is a study from Thomas et al. 2019, looking at different publicly available data sets from different countries. So you have France, China, Australia, USA, Italy represented here, in Canada. And what you see in these studies is usually it's kind of complicated to obtain fecal sample from colorectal donors, because you need the fecal samples before the colonoscopy. It means that you need a screening test, for example, a FIT test, to know that someone is at higher risk of developing cancer, for example, having a cancer. but you only know the answer after the colonoscopy. So that's why it's extremely complicated to have a lot of CRC individuals before the colonoscopy. And usually all the publicly available data sets that we have is about 100 individuals of fecal samples. That's the reason why it's really complicated to obtain them before the colonoscopy. And even what you see is even sometimes the basic information regarding age, gender, BMI is not known with these publicly available data sets. So we know that age is also participating or having a higher risk of developing colorectal cancer, but sometimes we don't have this basic information. So that's why it's kind of complicated to do this type of meta-analysis, but still, that's what they did. And what they did is that they detected the different species they have in the different fecal samples from the different cohorts. The one on the top, red species, are the ones that are most commonly detected in individuals with colorectal cancer. This is using a machine learning technique for classification, and the number that you have in the different cells is the ranking of the species in the models. If it's 1 or close to 1, it means that it's almost always used as a way to classify an individual at risk or not. And the species on the bottom are the species that are most commonly detected in control individuals in comparison. So what you can see here is Fusobacterium nucleatum is almost on the top, almost always used in the models. Porphyromonas genera, Porphyromonas gingivalis are also species that you detect. These two species that I mentioned are actually species that are detected in the oral locality, associated with gingivitis or periodontitis. In the bottom you have different type of microorganisms, and some like Bifidobacterium that are commonly detected in commensal microbiota. So this is common species that you have in healthy individuals.
Sorry, 4 minutes.
Okay. This is a graph of the precision of the classification between colorectal cancer or not, the EUC score. Close to 1 means that it's a perfect classification. Almost all the time you say it's colorectal cancer and you're right. And the numbers are the number of species that you use in the model to say it's colorectal cancer or not. The more species you use, the better the prediction is. And for most of the cohorts, you increase the accuracy above 0.8 of precision, which is really good. But you see, for some cohorts on the bottom, even if you increase the number of species, it's not improving the classification. And the main reason is for this cohort that is on the bottom, the collection and the DNA purification was of low quality. It was assessed after. So this is a main issue for this type of analysis. You really need to have a good way to collect and to make the DNA purification. Recently, this study was updated in 2025, but instead of going to the species level, they went to the strain level. So it went with the different type of functions, for instance, of the different type of subtypes of species, and they improved the classification. But the problem with these type of techniques is a little more costly because you need to sequence a little more. So it's like you zoom a little more in the picture to make it better in precisions. And what they saw is that most of the cohorts, they have a good prediction. Most of the time, it's oral microbiome species that are detected in colorectal cancer. And one of the cohort is actually really bad in classification compared to the other. And what we saw is that this is the only cohort where the fecal samples was collected after the oral cleansing agent. So also, if you collect the fecal sample with a specific molecule that accelerates the transit time, for instance, it will also reduce the performance of the classification. So I think I don't have to finish for the other slides, but it's just to let you know that there are international projects that try to gather a million microbiota. This is called the million microbiome. We have the French initiative called the French Gut, and in the French Gut we have this initiative of having 2,500 individuals collected before the colonoscopy, but it's not just FIT positive, it's also FIT negative individuals. So to really know what is the impact of microbiota. This is an ongoing project. So to finish, classify individuals at risk only if the method that you use are really highly standard on top to provide to detect the biomarkers. And now we have large-scale project that will accelerate the understanding of the role of the microbiota in the colorectal cancer development. Thank you very much. This is my team, and thank you very much for your attention.